AFR Talk. AFR Talk. This is Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth.
All right. We only had a short time with Dr. Josser, and we'll get him back on. I just want you to know that looking at, as he is an American soldier, American with Syrian relatives who are currently being impacted by the civil war, an extraordinary man. And I realize that there are many of people commenting saying there's not a third option. There aren't people who desire to be free in Syria. The Free Syrian Army has elements of Al-Qaeda that's penetrated. I get that, as well as the fact that some people say it's Al-Qaeda versus Iran, so can't they both lose? And actually there are people who, the third choice, if you will, who desire to be free, and they're not asking for boots on the ground. They're asking for support. And if we would have done that in 2011, we wouldn't be here today. And that brings me to the point of a discussion we had last night. We talked about leadership, and is President Obama a good leader? We think about the result of his policies in the sense of getting them passed. He's got Obamacare, he got Dodd-Frank. Hey, he did what he wanted to in Egypt. Mubarak stepped down. He had the Muslim Brotherhood in there for a year until obviously everybody figured out what we all knew. They were an oppressive Islamic fundamentalist group that is not interested in any form of democracy other than one election, one time, and then that's it. And then, hey, we can talk about democracy because they'll get the Iranian democracy or what we refer to as democracy in the former Soviet Union, where the candidates got 99% of the votes. And why did that happen? Oh, well, just look at Putin's recent past and the people that he supported as well as ran against, and you'll find them, anybody who gave him opposition, they were dead. And that's pretty much what dictators do. It's a reality, whether they're theological or theocratic or otherwise. In 2003, we were faced with a decision. We had evidence that Saddam Hussein, who had used chemical weapons before on his own people, had weapons of mass destruction, was developing weapons of mass destruction, a nuclear program in the works, and for the last 10 years had gained the system through 17 UN resolutions. And President Bush spoke of in March in announcing his policy on Iraq and the intent to assault and take out the Iraqi dictatorship, known chief of Saddam Hussein. He said, you know what? There is a case made for preemption when you see a growing threat. And he made that case very succinctly in a part of this speech at this address. And here he was, 2003, March 17th. Roll it.
In the 20th century, some chose to appease murderous dictators whose threats were allowed to grow into genocide and global war. In this century, when evil men plot chemical, biological, and nuclear terror, a policy of appeasement could bring destruction of a kind never before seen on this earth. Terrorists and terrorist states do not reveal these threats with fair notice in formal declarations. And responding to such enemies only after they have struck first is not self-defense, it is suicide.
So addressing a threat that we had intelligence on, not Bush lied, people died, that's the lie. The truth is we had a growing threat. The man had used these chemical weapons before on his own people. And were we going to wait for that to happen again? Nevertheless, President Obama, in making the case for Syria and military action and that red line, had to make the case not only for national security purposes, but the potential for this to happen again. Yet he had the narrative that Bush lied, people died, and had opposed the successful surge and talked about us being arrogant and getting sidetracked in Iraq. And so he ran against that, and then he's bringing us the other idea. But nevertheless, as a leader, as president, our president, he still has an excuse built in, and he's suspicious. He doesn't want another war. He spoke of that last night in an interview. Roll it.
I'm not sure that we're ever going to get a majority of the American people after over a decade of war, after what happened in Iraq, to say that any military action, particularly in the Middle East, makes sense in the absence of some direct threat or attack against us. And that's understandable. If you talk to my own family members or Michelle's, they're very wary and suspicious of any action.
Very wary and suspicious. Why? Why? Because of the way you've characterized it and the way you have surrendered it, quite frankly, because of your incompetence. Sorry, the buck stops with the president. It was Joe Biden's status of forces agreement. He failed. That's why we didn't have any assets today. We don't have any assets in Iraq. That's why when he opposed the surge, that worked, by the way, and we had people like Harry Reid say the Iraq war is lost in 2006, and obviously in 2009 it was a different story. He inherited a victory in Iraq. Now, the only way we have victories, and isn't it interesting talking about victories versus wars ending? But I digress. The only way we have these, the leader can go with the policy, but it's the American soldier, American Marine, airmen that take care of this. They are executing the policy. So as he says, oh yeah, I know the suspicions, I don't want to do that again, totally insults the effort in Iraq and what it was and mischaracterizes it. And yet comes to us after a red line has been crossed, says he didn't really make the statement and we need to have military action. Oh, it's going to be very, very small, unbelievably small, but not a pinprick. Comes to us that way. Bush had 17 UN resolutions. He was enforcing what the world said they were going to do. And he said the reason why was the consequence of doing nothing. The danger was too great. We find out, no, he didn't have nuclear weapons, but he did have weapons of mass destruction, and he did have programs, and he was gaming the system. Yet everybody wants to blame President Bush. He spoke of the fact of how he received so much blame after 2001. And he says, you remember back in 2001 when people were being dragged before Congress and everybody was getting upset because you didn't connect the dots? Well, in his final press conference, he makes the case of connecting the dots and refers back to that time and the criticism he received. He also talked about America's respect in the world. Roll it.
Do you remember what the environment was like in Washington? I do. When people were hauled up in front of Congress and members of Congress were asking questions about how come you didn't know this, that, or the other, and then we start putting, policy in place, legal policy in place to connect the dots, and all of a sudden people were saying, how come you're connecting the dots? And so, Mike, I've heard all that. I've heard all that. My view is that most people around the world, they respect America. And some of them doesn't like me. I understand that. Some of the writers and opiners and all that, that's fine. That's part of the deal. But I'm more concerned about the country and how people view the United States of America. They view us as strong, compassionate people who care deeply about the universality of freedom.
Until we elect a president that doesn't believe in that. Wow, that's harsh. Yeah, that's true. I have to look at the actions. It doesn't appear that he does, and what his words are certainly the fact that he doesn't back that. He doesn't stand up for that. He hasn't made the case. If he actually cared about free people, why did he support the Muslim Brotherhood? Why? Why didn't he stand up in 2011? Why didn't he speak to the people who desire to be free in Iraq after we secured their country for them? Yeah, imperfect as they come, absolutely. And it's not a Jeffersonian democracy. But against the alternative, what do you have? A Shia superstate, that's right, Iran, stronger, linked with Syria, connected, and a growing influence of a state that is second only to Al-Qaeda for American blood on their hands. That's the Iranian regime. If the president cared about accountability, we wouldn't have news crews from CNN and the Associated Press that are able to track the suspect that we've indicted who allegedly committed or took part in the murders in Benghazi and They reach him, but we can't. Do you follow me? No, this is not about hating President Obama. It's about exposing his record for what it is. President Bush, incidentally, was a class act and is a class act. You may agree or disagree with his policies. But in this next clip, you're going to hear what the president had to say about self-pity and the burden of the office. Remember, David Axelrod said, I don't know if we did President Obama a favor. President Obama talked about inheriting messes and everything else. And somebody asked President Bush about the burden of the office in his final press conference in 2009. Roll it.
I believe the phrase burdens of the office is overstated. Yeah, it's kind of like, why me? Oh, the burdens, Why did the financial collapse have to happen on my watch? It's just pathetic, isn't it? Self-pity. And I don't believe President-elect Obama will be full of self-pity.
Let's see. We do have a montage of President Obama, and maybe not self-pity, but not taking responsibility. Take a listen, and this was before the election in 2012. This montage was going around. Roll it.
We obviously have gone through one of the toughest times in our history economically over these last 2.5 years. Now, some of what we're facing today has to do with events beyond our control.
Part of it is the way our media has evolved.
Trillions of dollars in new tax cuts. The worst recession that we've had in generations.
That there was less money coming in.
Europe is dealing with all sorts of financial turmoil. The unrest in the Middle East. Japan's tragic earthquake.
People don't listen to each other as much.
High gas prices.
The way congressional districts are drawn.
Once we've had a run of bad luck. Earthquakes, revolutions.
So you get the idea. Now, understand that the president is a very tough job. Nobody mistakes. And we can have disagreements on policy. But if you evaluate this man's leadership, you see a man who's not interested in leading. He's interested in power. He's interested in getting what he wants accomplished regardless of the means to do it. Why else would he implement a policy that he objected to and said he could not do in 2011, and in 2012 he did? What was that? Oh, that was his own DREAM Act. Or we take what he stands for. 2009, goes overseas and apologizes for America. They say, he didn't apologize. He said we were arrogant. And we had a special obligation since we were the only country ever having to use atomic weapons without context. That saved lives. You see, when you take history out of context, when you view America as the great oppressor, the great empire-building imperialist nation, rather than the great liberator, you're going to go wrong. And then when you try to take America's reputation as leader of the free world and actually embrace the term, not because you actually believe in it, because you got called out on a red line that you spoke of, but you didn't do anything about. You didn't do anything back in April. No, you didn't do anything back in 2011 when free people were standing up, not with terrorists, but standing up and protesting Assad, by the way, who also has American blood on his hands, big time, through the Iraq War. He also is alleged to have ordered the assassination of Rafik Hariri in Lebanon. You see, when you're in that position and you have to make the case and nobody's buying it, and then a brutal dictator says, hey, I want to help you. And incidentally, by helping us, we assure the fact that Assad stays in power, that we have been seen by the world needing Vladimir Putin to come in and save us. Sends a great signal to our allies, our number one ally in the world, and I'd say in the world, arguably in the region, and I would say the world, that would be Israel. No, we haven't done a favor for people who desire to be free. No, he's not Ronald Reagan. He's not even Jimmy Carter. He's worse in the form of policy. And that's the bottom line. That's nothing but truth. Crane Durham's nothing but truth. Honor in your life, compassion in your heart. Remember to always, always keep the faith. This is going to be historically a terrible point in our history. AFR Talk.